I want to start with what is emotion regulation and what does it mean to you and to us when we're working with actors? I Googled just a brief description of what emotion regulation is, and I'll just share like a snippet because it goes on forever. It's Wikipedia, and I know there are probably better definitions of this by others, like Bessel, our boy Bessel, and Peter Levine, I'm sure, has one, and Stephen Porges and others. But I'm just going to go with this one just to start. That emotion regulation. Self-regulation of emotion or emotion regulation is the ability to respond to the ongoing demands of experience with the range of emotions in a manner that is socially tolerable and sufficiently flexible to permit spontaneous reactions, as well as the ability to delay spontaneous reactions as needed. That's vague, but specific in some way. Um, so when I started doing my work, I didn't even think about emotion regulation, though I knew I was doing it unconsciously. I just was, because I was trained in psychotherapy, I was just doing this emotion regulation. And someone had mentioned to me that that's what you're doing as well. And I thought, oh, yeah. And then I started thinking about, well, what actually is emotion regulation? So I'm going to hand that back to you guys now. So how do you define that, or do you?
Sarah, do you want to jump in there?
um, Certainly. So I think what you read was a very good overview, the ability to respond to an experience and be able to tolerate it. And I think that's fundamental for acting, for actors going into any highly emotional character that they're playing, if they're going to have to access something that and maybe an emotion they haven't accessed before, a situation they haven't been in before, and they have to get to that point. How do they regulate that within themselves? And then the different modalities that we're all working with in our own way to enable that facilitation of being able to get to a point. And how do I get to that point safely? I could probably get there from A to B in a way that perhaps doesn't serve my health, but I can get there. But our fundamental problem to solve is how to get them from A to B with that toleration. So that underlining tolerance has to be there in that way that they can do it. And as just a brief example in my work, um, as I'm taking actors or whoever through different life events that they've gone through, and how they've managed to get from A to B within a certain situation enables them to have a cognitive and an embodied experience of how did I tolerate that situation. So when going into another, they have a sort of a baseline on how they've coped within themselves. I'll leave it there for you, Tom, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I share a lot of those views as well, Sarah. And I think that what's important is understanding the notion of emotional intelligence in relationship to emotion regulation. And I think one of the keystones of emotional intelligence is understanding the context you're in and the framework that you're working within. So I think for actors, there's two points there. I think is really understanding the difference between emotions on the stage and emotions in their own lives. Understanding the difference in terms of are they regulating the character or are they regulating their own selves? So I think it's about creating a clear distinction between the social realm, who they are in the world, and the artistic realm, who they can be on stage. So with that understanding and that ability to, as Sarah mentioned, understand how they got there and how they can get out, that ability to sort of leave whatever they choose to leave out in the artistic realm when they return to the social realm. So that clear distinction, so that they're not blurring boundaries between self and character. And I think that there's lots and lots of ways in which an actor can do that. And I think that what I'm seeing in the community now is people addressing what that missing factor was from many acting techniques, which was the notion of emotion. I think that's largely got to do with the fact that the techniques that most people use for acting were developed 150 years ago, and they looked to the science of their time and to sort of understand human behavior. And they did not know very much about emotion at all. They still were in a world where they didn't understand neuroplasticity. They didn't understand how emotions are processed, and there was a clear separation between mind and body. And all of that stuff is gone. And I think that we're in a state where we are much more aware of emotions, much more concerned with our emotional health. And that's starting to integrate itself into our acting processes. So the technique is evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was on about, and about the fact that emotion regulation has been left out of techniques, acting
Yeah.
techniques. Um, and yeah,
We basically, in the work that I do, emotional fluency training for the actor, we teach a vocabulary of emotion. So we teach affect, and we work an awful lot in terms of establishing a kind of an emotional intelligence in relationship to acting. So what are the demands? What are the differences between the social realm, who you are in the world, and who you can be on stage? What are those differences? How is it different when we act emotionally on the stage than when we act emotionally in life? And there are some very uh, stark differences that I think are important for the actor to recognize, and then to understand how um, to work with emotions, to have control of the emotions that they're working with, and how to enter and exit.
so it's interesting because I know how you work, Tom, and it's really you and Enos, the way you approach the work. Uh, I've experienced it as being mechanical to a point where well, I can allow my emotion to come in. However, I'm also aware of the technique of what I'm doing to draw that out of me.
Yeah.
So when it comes to regulating, and you had mentioned this as well to me when we did a little bit of a demo together, um, that you can regulate, you can tone it down. So can you speak to maybe to that kind of like how does emotional fluency work when we're talking about toning down and bringing it up?
Well, I mean, if you look at certain modalities around emotion, you can look at valence in terms of the degree to which you're in an emotional state. We don't work with emotion words; we work with letters and numbers, so it takes the subjectivity out of it. Um, uh, but basically, the way that we work is we use the emotional effector pattern to establish a vocabulary, and those have, they start with the basic emotions, and we look at what would be the affect or the accepted affect of basic emotions, both in terms of facial expression, body posture, and breath patterns. And we're now working on adding sound. What are the sounds that accompany that? So those are the things that those are the actors' tools. That's what they work with when they train.
I
So
so I'm sorry, just at that point, because I know this is going to get really complex, and as we get it's more complex, I want to be able to bring us both in, all three of us together for
yeah,
the ride. So having said that about body, sound, uh, facial posturing, I think I want.
body posture, facial expression, and breath pattern.
Okay, so I just want Sarah to weigh in on come in at that point, and how do those play into your work with emotion regulation, if they do?
Um, They don't. There's no technique. I don't work with technique. So what came out of this process, my process, is a character study tool, but it is not an acting technique. The basis of my work was, like you were saying, and I write to this point as well. These techniques all come from the same seed, basically, of Russian realism, right? We're all spreading out and how we go about that. And so, from my perspective, it was, well, it is interesting to look at the solutions they asked to that question. You know, Diderot's fundamental question: should the actor feel or should he not feel? But I think it's far more vital to answer those questions for ourselves in our own way and figure out our own way to get from A to B, which is what we're all doing in our own way with our own practices. So my seed starts, instead of starting with emotion, it starts with self-inquiry. So from my perspective, it was, if you have a better, a more solid understanding of the relationship that you have with your own body, with the way you've told your own story, then it puts you in a safer place to then engage with the other, right? So to another point you were making, what about it draws out emotion? So for me, and I'm talking about my perspective on being a participant as I work through the process for the very first time, and identifying the images that I had, and then identifying the images that were for the character. And I talk in image, from a Jungian perspective now, is when I was on stage performing my piece, what I was seeing to access emotion were the images that belonged to her. And it was for the very first time that I had experienced being on stage, not seeing anything of myself. I was completely removed from my own associations, if you will, from this. The arc of the character was grief. It wasn't my grief I was accessing. I wasn't seeing my pain. I had a visual representation of the images that belonged to her, and that's what guided me into that emotion that I was feeling at the time. And so when I went through the ritual that I have to walk out, it was towards my own image. So that in terms of emotional self-regulation, the connection with me is not I wouldn't say it was a technique. It's more of, it has its basis in knowing self and knowing other, and knowing that if I see, the most fundamental thing for me was, if you're not seeing duality, it's unhealthy. You have to see two in order for, when stepping on, to be, and this is my experience, completely being this one other thing that's generated by the two. And when that's over, there are two completely different bodies, stories,
Right.
emotions. And so,
Okay.
yeah.
I think that's a beautiful technique. I would call it a technique.
It
Yes.
is.
I refer
But
to it as practice, but yes.
and I can see that in comparison, Tom, you talked about the emotions that we have in life and the emotions that we have on stage. It's kind
Yeah.
of a similar approach. It's the same idea.
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, an interesting kind of way to look at it, and this is how, we sort of frame everything at the beginning of our workshop, so that there's an intellectual understanding of what people are doing, which is, I think, really, really important for ownership and agency. But we break down the body into a sort of an integrated dynamic system of information processes. So we look at that, and we sort of align them in a certain way, which would be the intellect, the imagination, emotion, and the sensual, the senses. So when you look at technique, and when we're talking about this, about acting, where the actor wants to end up, every technique is in the sensual, so that whatever they're expressing can be seen and felt by the audience. So there has to be some physical expression in the moment in relationship to the other actors or to the imaginary circumstances. There has to be an embodiment, and that has to happen through the senses.
Mm.
So that's where we're all trying to get to. And you know, and you can look at different techniques in different ways. When you're looking at script analysis, well, you're coming from the intellect, which is supposed to stimulate the imagination, and then into the you know, emotion, and then that comes out physically. So all of that's you know, is very sort of clear. And when Sarah talks, I would say that, you know, you're coming in through the imagination, and it radiates to both directions, both to the intellect and down into the sensual self. I would say that Michael Chekhov's technique would tend to focus more on the imaginative. Um, we start from, which is kind of a therapeutic model, it's not why we picked it particularly, but we start from the sensual self and then let that work up. So it's a bottom up technique, which is something that's become popular in therapeutic applications as well. It's not why we picked it. It's mainly for the control.
Mm.
So when we demonstrated to you, Alan, this sort of mechanical approach, that's the way we basically approach it. Sarah, I really love that you were talking about, well, it's not really my emotion, it's this creation's emotion of my imagination. And that's something we really believe in. And often in our workshops, when we don't want people to remain mechanical, we want them to start mechanical. So they have the control. So they know this is when this happens, this is associated with this emotion, or when this happens, this is associated with this emotion. So they have a clear understanding about how they got there. Physically, they can feel it so that they can unwind that in the same process. But gee, I just lost my train of thought there. It was something that Sarah said that I thought was a really strong connection for me. It will come back. My apologies. Yeah.
So the blocked emotion and embodiment through senses, I want to come back to that, those ideas.
Oh, let me just before I come back to that, I did remember. Yeah. So in starting up, what we find from the bottom up is that actually also stimulates the imagination, and then we've had people that sort of just start with the mechanics of an emotion and basically go, oh my God, my whole backstory came to me for the character. So all of those processes are working simultaneously. It's just where is our awareness?
Yeah.
And that's where we focus the awareness into the somatic self, and sort of take it from that approach. But we are looking at generating a connection so it doesn't remain mechanical.
Right.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
will just interject just briefly that the point from which my practice starts is from the body. So the body movement then would extend then into that what you term imagination.
So we're the same there in that sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Okay. So yeah, now so I've just got a whole new understanding, or yeah, a new level of understanding of how the emotional fluency can work with what I do. And so yeah, so coming back to embodiment through the senses, blocked emotion, and coming and the overriding idea of emotion regulation again. This idea. So what I believe that what I'm doing in actor care is breaking down the components of a narrative that is happening for a character. The actor is producing that narrative, but by chunking it out and saying, you know, that this is happening within me, and then embodying that affect or that emotion. And to an embodiment, and I mean just the way you both of you have talked about embodying through the senses, through the imagination, uh, through the breath, and putting it together with various other embodiments that they're doing and other narratives and other affects. They are able to put it all together by having, you know, objects or pieces of paper right in front of them with statements that are written from these affects, so that when they're doing their monologue or the scene, they have all these pieces, like they see them visually, they've experienced them, so they can easily drop into them, and know that if it gets too much, like for an example, one of the as part of the narrative that is created for the character, there is a defense, and there is a resilient quality. And those are built into what I do, so that within the character, if they're feeling overwhelmed, or if they want to just tone it down, they can jump to either the defense, just to block what's happening, which is another layer to the character, or they can jump to the resilient quality of the character and, hold on, if it's joy, or if it's I don't know, whatever it might be, they can then regulate themselves that way. So that's sort of the built-in, I don't know, what do you call them, levers in the model. So, and what I find fascinating is how these model are all three of our models can work together, and I can take advantage of both of your models into mine.
Mhm.
And having said that, with the emotion regulation, that piece of, if they're when we're exploring the resilient quality, and they're having trouble maybe experiencing what that feels like, to really feel what it means to be joyful, um, to help them physically. What is your face doing? Like, I might see them wanting to be joyful. And then if I knew the vocabulary that you use, Tom, that then I would be able to help them unblock.
Mhm.
And to that notion, how, Sarah, would you help me unblock a character with your technique? Yeah,
Is that a question, or is that
no,
rhetorical?
it's a question. It's a question.
Um, how to unblock a character?
And I don't
Well, the process, I suppose, the process that the practice that I go through, uh, I've never seen a block for a character, so I don't know how to answer that question.
it
Um,
might be that I'm using the wrong word, the wrong term.
Yeah, I wonder what can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean as a block?
yeah, yeah.
Just having trouble accessing an emotion.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. So then I would turn to the tools that I use are movement, writing, and drawing, and whatever portal that I can use to get in that. So if there's a certain piece of uh, the script that obviously that's what they're using, and then they're not being able to access whatever that emotion is, I would read it aloud to them and have them move to it to see where it drops in the body and what that evokes, and then have them slowly come in and take over the words as they're continuing the movement to see what that is, so that the cognitive is taken out of it, and the cognitive piece of the body is no longer in control. It's the somatic body piece that's taking over and seeing what those words do to them inside.
And how what about their safety? How do you support them with safety before they, like, if they say, well, that makes me nervous to do that and not have my brain engaged?
Then we start with writing, or we do drawing, um, and then we hopefully we can gradually get the body to move in some way. It doesn't have to be, all this kind of movement. It can be a hand, or it can be a head, or it can be this. It doesn't have to be any kind of big movement if someone is hesitant about movement. And it's interesting that quite a few actors are hesitant with that. But that's why I like to work with three portals of entry: writing. If they want to remain cognitive, it's writing. We can get that into drawing. If image is difficult for them, then I go to the senses, because if you can't see an image of bacon, you can certainly smell it. So you have the image through the sense. So just depending on what their comfort level is, I just start with whatever
Hmm.
their comfort safety level is before.
You just brought up another interesting point about neurodivergence and the senses, and not that's another conversation altogether.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
but you said something that I want to ask Tom about. The points of access. Oh, about have you experienced in your work uh, with emotional fluency actors being resistant to the work to going where you're asking them to go, and what do you do?
Well, I think part of our work, well, I'm going to sort of address that question by asking the both of you a question, because something occurs to me, and something's what we're working on is very fundamental skills
Mhm.
um, that work in concert with existing training methodologies. So if somebody's studying, and it seems to me, and I might be completely wrong with this, um, do you see that your work is really for people that already know how to act?
No,
No. So you see that your work is a methodology to teach people to act
no, I think it's for both. You
for
don't
both.
need, yeah, you can be coming into your first year of acting, I think, and achieve
Mm.
what you want to out of this practice. And if you are a seasoned actor, it might give you it will give you a completely different tool in with which to approach character
Right.
study.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
that
and
makes sense.
and for me, I though I have now and then worked with beginning actors who find it a bit challenging to understand what's happening. Um, I wouldn't rule it out. So I would want to be on Sarah's boat with that. But it's usually what I've been doing is it's been final year students, it's been students who are out there, actors who are out there, and professional actors. I do find that the point of entry for each level is different.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, in terms of blocks and stuff, I mean, the way that we work is so much like the training is really about titration, about being able to enter. Like if I was to look at a valence and go, so if I was working with, and we don't, I would say I would use 1B. And 1B would be associated with family that we might identify as anger. But at a very low level, the affect that's expressed in anger or in 1B, if at a very low level, that could just be determination. You
Mhm.
know, the chest comes forward slightly. There's a kind of a narrowing of the eyes, and the jaw is a little bit more set. It could just be determination. We don't see that as anger. So but you slide it up the scale, you can go through irritation, you can go through all the way to rage. And
Mhm.
what we will do is start with teaching the affect and going up and down that scale so that they have control. And then putting that in relationship to a partner, and then and in an imaginary circumstances following that.
Mhm.
So it's really behavior based. So if we never start with story or an imaginative thing, we just say, let's put these patterns in relationship. What happens if I put my 1B against your 2A, and play with the levels of that and see. And of course, there's at any time anybody's feeling uncomfortable, it's about going down that scale again back to zero.
Mhm.
So if we have the social realm and the artistic realm, in between that is a doorway that we call zero, which is a pattern that we teach that has no affect. Very hard to achieve. But it's so basically before we would start in that zero pattern, and then whatever you choose to work with is the artistic realm.
Mhm.
And basically, and we go back and forth, up and down that scale, 1 to 10, so that people have control of that. So we really don't find that we run into blocks that often. But because, and again, this is the point that I wanted to make. Something that you said, Sarah, which is really important, is it's not my emotion, it's emotion.
Mhm.
And that's something that people often experience. I certainly did when I trained in the patterns, is that I was continually doing my sadness,
Yes.
which has a certain kind of effect, which is kind of a grimace. It looks something like this, and it's like really about me fighting that sadness.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, when I just let the effector patterns sort of work on me, I went, oh, this is not my sadness. This is sadness.
Mm,
That kind of ability to separate um, then allowed me the control to sort of add my sadness in if I wanted to.
right.
But I could also was very aware what that was. What was my sadness? What was I adding into sadness that made it mine? And so
Yeah.
I could, just
Right.
yeah. And the language becomes really simple after the long run. Like I remember scenes or directing a scenes. Well, actually, when I first introduced Enos and my other colleagues to some of the work, we were watching an improvisation with a couple of students, right? And I could sort of see what they were hinting at in their relationship. So I just said 2A, and the whole scene, the dynamic of it changed, the relationship of it changed. So was that a block that they were having?
Mm.
I think it would say, what is a block? And for me, a block is when the social realm, I mean, we're trained all of our lives with social compliance and we have our histories to contend with and stuff. And then all of a sudden you walk into a class, an acting class where you're supposed to go towards the conflict. And all of a sudden my impulse, artistic impulse, is to go either strangle you or to kiss you or whatever. And I go, some part of me or a big part of me goes, you can't do that. That's inappropriate. But the acting impulse is correct. And so what we work with is the notion of emotion is action. So if you're feeling that affect starting to emerge, allow yourself to follow it, to sort of allow it to embody. And when you do that, you then find that you're affecting your partner. So it goes back and forth that way. Then their emotion, because one emotion affects another emotion. So they get on this role that we all want in terms of actors.
Mhm.
It feels like everything that you're emotional fluency is emotion regulation. That's what it feels like.
It is, yes, yeah. It is a strategy it is exactly that. It's emotion regulation, but in relationship to acting.
Yes,
I
yes.
think emotion regulation in the real world is a different thing.
Yes, exactly. It certainly is.
When
Yeah.
when you were talking about 1As and 2B, and I thought, it's suddenly occurred to me that, oh, this sounds like you're writing a program for an interface. It's
Yeah,
like this is behind the scenes stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
Cool.
yeah.
What I love about what you're talking about, Tom, is reminding me of a story. A friend of mine years and years ago, was playing, oh, I don't remember which Greek heroine it was, that same Medea. And she was having a great deal of trouble getting to this primal scream that she had to do on stage. And finally, this one night during rehearsal, she did that scream. And the director, who was Greek, he said, "You got the scream." He said that it was great. Don't ever do it again, because only even she only had to do that once. So
Mhm.
now you have to figure out how you got there. And what
Yeah,
you're speaking to is how to get there. I know what that sounds like, but how do I do that 8 shows a
yes,
week?
yes, yeah, absolutely. And that was an interesting point for a discovery we had. We had a research grant that went on for a couple of years, and we work with actors across the country. And this is how we developed this technique. But something we didn't expect was that all of the actors talked about how how it helped them in terms of their two things: connection to their partner. They had never felt so connected to their partner. And secondly, repeatability. Because they had that pathway, they could recreate the moments that they wanted.
Mhm.
So we started to realize, oh, this is actually helps acting technique. It's not away from acting technique. It's dealing with emotions is a way to support the existing acting techniques.
Yes,
And
exactly.
yeah, and what you're saying about repeatability is true for all three of us, what we do.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, because there is a defined approach. We did a whole bunch of interviews with actors before we started our project about what they knew about emotion.
Yeah.
Nothing.
No.
Yeah, and they were actually often really discouraged. So yeah, to sort of address the notion of emotion. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it. It's not reliable. It's very reliable. Yeah, we
Yeah.
do it all the time. The act we actually all of the skills that we use on the stage we use every day in life. We take on roles. We regulate our emotions. We respond to a specific time at 8 p.m. I have to teach a class, so it doesn't matter how I'm feeling. I take on my teacher body. The difference is that the extent and the degree to which actors are able to do that and to do that consistently, and to the level that they're able to go to, the heightened emotion they're able to go to. So it's a little bit like, can we all throw a football? Yes, but can we play in the NHL? No, but they're the same skills.
That's the NFL.
NFL, yes. Canadians in hockey, what can I say?
That would be a real that would be a great show to see a football on a ice rink.
Talk about mixed metaphors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd buy a ticket.
Uh, um, so yeah, we've been going like all over the place.
Exciting, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
love it.
I'm excited when we kind of merge and we go, oh, look at that. There's just that
Yeah.
dovetailing going on that and I see a moment of using all of our stuff together. Can we say that all three of our approaches, the aim is for the actor to self-regulate? I mean, so, and in that self-regulation, they have the control to do whatever they want in their performance.
I wouldn't disagree with that. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think it begs a definition of emotion
Yeah,
regulation, which is
it's
where we
a very
started.
specific
Yeah.
definition. Yeah, and I would agree with that. Yeah.
So in that, can we can we define emotion regulation for redefine it now that I sort of started out with a definition? Now that we've had the conversation, what else can we throw into that definition of emotion regulation?
For me, I would say it's the ability to fully to enter the artistic realm. Again, I'm using my terms, artistic realm, and to return to the social realm um, safely and with control and with awareness.
Yes.
Um, and I also don't think that it's about like it's not a perfect world. There are going to be times when an actor uh, for whatever reason that they may not understand, can't let go of an emotion. We're still feeling it in their body, is feeling a little unsettled, or can't sleep that night, or wants to return to bad behavior, bad coping mechanisms, or whatever. That's going to happen. But the big thing is the awareness that that's what's going on for them.
Yeah.
And that has to be there. And then there needs to be strategies for restorative practice, strategies for after you leave the rehearsal or the performance, what are your strategies to really make sure that your system has calmed down and that you've returned fully? We've certainly found in our work that sometimes people can be cognitively clear, so they're not confused between who they are in the world and who they are on the stage, but they weren't actually physically clear.
Right.
So we realized even our techniques weren't enough. They needed their own restorative practice that they could rely on. And many actors do that anyway. But, it's really, really important for those actors that may not have a strategy.
So self-regulation then is what you're saying, and I agree with you as well. I think has to do with boundaries, self-awareness, resilience.
Mhm.
Those are all part of self-regulation tech
Strategies.
strategies. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what it is. And I don't think it's solely self-awareness. I think it's awareness. It's a conscious awareness of this is what I'm doing,
Mhm.
instead of uh
Mhm.
coming out of a character, and just going off and doing whatever you do. Okay, I'm cognitively clear, I'm going off, I'm doing what I'm doing. It's to have a conscious practice that you do afterwards, so that the cognitive and then the body piece, the physical piece of the body, is consciously aware of what it's doing. And
Mhm.
it's like well, yeah, it has to be spoken or moved. It has to be, in order for it to be viable, in order to be aware. So I think awareness is absolutely key, in terms of self-regulation. It's not just something in the back of your mind. It's something that you're physically doing.
Yeah. It's awareness and an acknowledgement of your current state.
Yes.
And it's an understanding that that's not a hard line.
Right.
But that goes back to the piece around emotional intelligence. I may come out of a difficult rehearsal and I'm not quite physically clear. I'm fine, but I'm finding I'm irritable at home or something like that. And it's about acknowledging, oh, I'm irritable. What's that about? Oh, okay. And then it's connecting those pieces. And then
Yeah.
you have that awareness comes in. Then you have a chance at going, okay, what can I do to actually counter or to restore or to, yeah,
Yeah.
rejuvenate. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those tools of what I can do is what we all do as well.
Yeah, the understanding that theater is a composition. It's something we do intentionally and we repeat.
Yeah.
And that and composition has a language. Every art form has a language, and in theater, a big part of that expression of embodiment and is the physical vocabulary of emotion,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
how
so,
we stimulate that and give the actor control over that can be a many splendored thing, as we see.
yeah. And that's what I believe too, is that allowing them, I guess it's maybe I can call it a vocabulary, but I don't. Um, Tools that
Mhm.
allow them to see what it is they're creating outside of themselves so that they can ingest it and then spit it out again and know what they've ingested.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, like you say, if they walk away and like, they're still feeling kind of weird the next day and they're kind of irritable, uh, there's that, well, the opportunity, one of my principles is self-reflection. So just reflect, and we can bring that in, we bring that into the work. So we're slowing it down so
Well,
nobody
titration,
gets hurt.
that was the word you used, Tom, which is the perfect word.
What was the word?
Titration, yeah,
Titration.
Titration.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I get. Yeah, that kind of makes that's yeah.
Yeah.
I've come across that word in psychotherapy. Titration.
Oh yeah, yeah. Big thing. Breaking things down. It's a great, word.
This is the
Yeah.
sound. When I think of titration, I think of this sound. You hear that?